This is the Menopause Movement Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Gordon. Now, here at the Menopause Movement, we've surveyed over 50,000 menopausal women. And through this, we've discovered that the number one cause of menopausal suffering for our clients is weight gain. Now, you've said things like, how do I lose the menobelly? I don't recognize myself anymore. How can I get me back? When menopause hit me out of the blue, I had no idea what was happening. And when I gained about 50 pounds overnight, I hated what I saw in the mirror. The menopause movement exists to provide world-class transformational education to women who are suffering from the symptoms and effects of menopause. And we're here to give you the education you need to get your life back. We want menopause to be the best time of your life. I mean, it is for me, and I want that for you. After years of trial and error, I finally cracked the code with my menopause weight. And now I want to share with you how I did it. I realized that what helped me the most was a challenge. So we've created a challenge for you to help you lose your menobelly. Simply go to menopausemovement.com/challenge to sign up. I'll see you there. What's up, everyone? So excited to be here today with author and fitness coach, Amanda Thebe. If menopause has felt like the apocalypse of your life, this episode is for you. I've been following Amanda on Instagram for a while now, but when her post started to really resonate with me, I thought she would be a great fit for you. I had a great time talking with her today, and her passion for helping women thrive through menopause is evident in our conversation. Amanda is a personal trainer with nearly 30 years of experience in the fitness industry. She's a popular guest on podcasts and online summits, and her health and fitness tips have been featured in media outlets like Shape, Prevention, Healthline, Global News, and The Doctors. She is the author of Menopocalypse, How I Learned to Thrive During Menopause and How You Can Too. She lives in Houston, Texas. During the podcast, we talk about Amanda's menopause experience and how it changed her life, hormonal predation in the wellness industry, what to do to improve nutrition in menopause, how carbs aren't the enemy, exercise, menopause, mindset, and accountability, Amanda's experience with contracting and recovering from COVID, the role failure plays in making ourselves better, and stay to the end to find out Amanda's stress management tips for us. At the end of the episode, make sure you visit menopausemovement.com/blog, where you can find the show notes plus the links to the books and resources mentioned in the episode. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts so you're always the first to know when each episode is released. If you haven't left a review for this podcast yet, please take the time to write a review, because when you do this, more women can find it and get the help they need during the disruption of menopause, because no one should have to go it alone. Thanks again for being a part of the menopause movement. And now let's get to Amanda. Amanda Thebe, welcome to the Menopause Movement Podcast. I'm really happy to have you here today.
Yes, I'm very excited to be here. Let's do it.
Yeah, so it's been really fun. I met you on Instagram, and you're one of these unapologetic people that just basically calls crap out. And, this podcast particularly will probably be not safe for work, because there's going to be quite a bit of swearing. And so I'm warning you now that if you're listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube and you don't like swearing, you better click off.
I do swear a little bit, but I always think it's appropriately done and in context with my fury at the time.
Well, that's a good intro to talk about fury. You wrote a book called Menopocalypse, and I did mention the book in the intro, and I want to just kind of I always ask people who come on the podcast, like, what is your menopause story? And, you've really, I read most of your book, and I love the fact that you kind of went through all the phases by yourself. And we've surveyed tens of thousands of women here in the menopause movement, and almost everything you wrote in your book is kind of what, it's just so relatable. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about what happened with you?
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe a bit of a meno mourn, because essentially that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to complain, and I sometimes do get a bit sick of my own story too. Because, women don't like to dwell on things too much, I don't think. But I do also know that it matters that I've got a story, because that makes me relatable. And my story is no different to hundreds of thousands of women, unfortunately. And so it's essentially that. I went through perimenopause and I didn't know what was happening. I had no information. I was on my own. I actually had an amazing team of medical professionals, helping me. I had a neurologist, ear, nose, and throat doctor, a vestibular rehabilitation, my own GP. They all could desperately see that I wasn't well and wanted to help me, but not one of them could join those dots together and say, maybe this is perimenopause, maybe Amanda is hormonal and she needs help in that respect. And I went, this was when I was age 42, and I went into my 40s, as smug as fuck. Like, I just was like, look at me. I'm nailing this aging business. I'm fit, I'm healthy, I feel good, and I do believe that I'm a good role model for women. I mean, I never try and compete. I always try and be, we're all the same, right? And so I always wanted to be that approachable person. And then all of a sudden, I didn't recognize what was happening to me. I had extreme symptoms that impacted my quality of life, impacted my relationships with my husband and my children and my friends. I lost the person that I am today. So I have come back, thankfully. Symptoms of vertigo, extreme dizziness, loss of feeling in my face down one side of my body, ultimately depression, which I didn't know I had, because I think when you've never had depression and then you get depression, you don't know. I just thought I was this miserable cow and this was my new personality, and I just had to get on with it. And, I went to see a gynecologist, and it was about something else, an ovarian cyst. And at the end of the consultation, he said, okay, you're good to go. I'll see you in a year. And I started crying, and he was like, what's the matter? And I went, I don't know, actually. I've spent 2 years not knowing who I am anymore. And he went, and I told him my story, and he went, these are symptoms of perimenopause. They're very standard. I suspect you've got migraine with aura, which turns out I have, and you're struggling with depression. And I can help you, and these are valid. And for the first time in those 2 years, I actually felt a sense of relief and not despair. And that sort of sent me down the path to being like, no woman should have to go through this. We're all, if we're lucky enough, going to go through this. Why could nobody help me?
Yeah.
Like, why?
I mean, your story is so common, and it's similar to mine, but I gained a lot of weight. I mean, I gained almost overnight. I gained like 50 pounds, and it felt like that, right? And so it was like, well, what do I do now? And why am I crying at commercials? Yeah. And so we have this problem that, we like to say that if this happened to men, there would be some solution probably. And it doesn't. It happens to us as women, and it's important that we figure it out. And so for me, it was like, if I'm having this much trouble as a doctor finding information, then how much more can it be for the rest of the women who have, been able to go through menopause? And I like to say, it's not really a medical condition per se. You can get some because of the symptoms, but what it is the privilege of a long life. And what we get to do is then figure out what our life is like now. And I think that's where your book comes in, because it is a nice guidebook for kind of how to navigate.
It is. And, your story is not unfamiliar either. Like the idea, the amount of doctors, thankfully my book is written in a respectful way to the medical community, and a lot of doctors are jumping on it saying it's really nice to have a lay person's point of view to go with the medical perspective, which is very much the way my viewpoint aligns. And but there's so many doctors I've spoken to exactly the same as you, and I'm like, Jesus, I'm speaking to gynecologists that never did this in their fellowship training. Yeah. And we know now that the numbers are like 10 and 20% of them may do a 2-hour course. It's shocking. And so part of the reason that I wanted to, actually didn't want to be a voice of menopause. It literally was never in my dreams to do this, but one of the reasons I was driven to actually take up the cause was because I shared my story about 3 or 4 years ago in one blog article, and it sort of went viral in my world. It wasn't like massive, but maybe it's like 60,000 people shared it. And it was like, that's me, that's me. So I created a community that was really just a soapbox for women to say, like, is this perimenopause? Why am I struggling to find the information? Can you help me? Can you point me in the right direction? And I just couldn't believe that it had to be so hard. And, you said it's not a medical condition, and obviously it's not. It's something that we end up being privileged to go through, because obviously many women can't or don't, I should say. But there are solutions that are valid for women. They're just not offered to women. So that's what's frustrating for me as well, is that if it were men, they would be offered a solution. Women are not being offered it, and they're having to fight. They're being gaslighted by the medical community, or told to just, get on with it. Your mother did.
And suffer through it.
Yes,
just,
suffer.
Just
and
suffer
that's the
through
thing.
it.
We shouldn't have to suffer, right? You think about childbirth and death, they're both natural, but we don't suffer, do we? There's no reason to suffer.
I don't know. I suffered.
But there are choices you can make, is what I'm saying.
Of course. Yeah, no. And that's the thing. And what I found was, when I was doing the research just for me, trying to figure out, like, how do I navigate this time in my life and make it something that, doesn't suck. I started going through the research, started reading a bunch of books and reading articles. And what I found was that there was so much disjointed and strange information out there, and a lot of misinformation. Like, so today's the day after you put up a post about one of these guys that preys on women who are changing, right? And or says that your hormones might be imbalanced, which is a load of shit, ladies. Okay, your hormones aren't imbalanced. It's just, you might need a little bit of support. But imbalanced hormones is a phrase put together by the pharmaceutical companies and the supplement companies.
It's not a medical term, is it?
It's not real.
It's used all the time. Yeah.
It's bullshit. Let's just so, but I mean, it's not that there isn't support. There is. I mean, some of us do need some hormonal support, and that can help. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of misinformation out there, because we don't really regulate hormonal stuff, and that we can go down the whole path of patriarchy if we wanted to talk about that. But I don't know that that's really where we should go. I do think that when it comes to what we should talk about is when it comes to nutrition and menopause, right? This is what you do. This is one of the big things that you do. And so how do you recommend that women who go through menopause really start to look at eating differently to support their changing bodies?
Yeah. And I'll answer that with the first part of the question, which was about being preyed on as well. So so I'm in the wellness industry, which is it's gross, right? There are some really strong key players in the industry, like there is in any industry. And then there's also the charlatans and the guys that are the people that want to sell you some type of snake oil instant remedy. Right. You said, I put 50 pounds on almost overnight, and it's a turn of phrase, but somebody will say to you, I can target your belly fat and help you lose it in 21 days. And the marketing's advanced, and it's attractive, and the onus is completely on these companies and the marketing. It's not on the women that buy the products. Because I've had women say to me, I fell for that. I feel like such a failure. It's not your fault at all. We completely understand that you don't recognize yourself. You feel vulnerable. And they're preying on that. They're literally taking advantage of you. And so I'm trying to help women identify some red flags in the nutrition and fitness industry. One of them is, if your coach calls herself or himself a hormone balancing coach, bye. Because I'm obviously not an endocrinologist, but I have nutrition and exercise science, and I've never been told that I can balance hormones for women. I have coaches I see online that are selling testing, private testing, Dutch testing that costs $400-500. And they're the same qualifications of me. They're analyzing women's hormones. And I just think it's terrible, and it's unethical.
Isn't that practicing medicine without a license?
Well, I think it's a private test, so it's almost sold like a food
Yeah.
sensitivity test. So I spoke to one of the UK's top endocrinologists, and she said that in her view, she's seen the results of these testings, this dried urine testing, and the results are valid, but the people who are analysing them are not valid, and it's completely out of their scope, and so they're being either misdiagnosed with some made-up illness, or they're being given supplements to help with it, and the supplement industry is unregulated, and it probably won't help them, whereas an endocrinologist can look at, or a gynecologist, if it's female hormones as well, can often look at blood work and it being the same information, if blood work's even needed, because symptoms can be enough. When it comes to my world, in the fitness and wellness world, it's awful to say this, but there are no shortcuts. There are no gimmicks. It's basic nutrition science, and exercise science hasn't changed. But we know that there are some considerations that menopausal women need to look at. But these are like additions. These aren't like things that a woman has to start restricting and taking away. So for example, the first question you asked was nutrition. So we know that there may be a little bit more of a fructose sensitivity, right? And so people have jumped onto that and said, okay, women can't eat fruit. And it's like, that's not what that means at all.
That's not what that means. Yeah, I agree with you there. Fructose is a byproduct of the corn industry.
And it's the additional sugars that are added to things. And so it basically means, all of your bars of chocolate that you're eating, your 20 bars of chocolate probably aren't going to serve you so well. Maybe reduce it down to one. I don't even think women need to completely cut sugar. I think it's all about finding a balanced approach, because when you completely omit food groups, you become, you have a restrictive mindset. And when you have a restrictive mindset, what you're going to do, you're just going to go head first into a big box of chocolates, aren't you? You just need to find
it's that inner child that just wants what they want. And so when you say I can't have that, it's like, well, wait a minute. No, I've got to have it. I've got to have it right now. And so then your mind doesn't turn off. But I wanted just to circle back on fructose, because I've talked about it a few times. And one of the things that I think it's really important to know is that the food lobby is not, especially here in America, is not for us. It's not for nutrition, it's for industry. And so when it comes to things like the corn, whatever the corn industry does, they've got this byproduct of corn oil, and they've got this byproduct of high fructose corn syrup, and high fructose corn syrup is metabolized in the liver just like alcohol is. And that's why we have seen over the years, in the last 30, 40 years, we've seen an increase in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And it's not your fault. You're drinking Pepsi. Pepsi's not supposed to be horrible for you. But that's the sugar in there. So I just wanted to kind of circle back on that.
Yeah. If you're literally getting all your hydration from 10 cans of Coke every day, why don't you consider just reducing it down to one and replacing it with something else, right? Just keep it simple instead of there's a lot of scary stuff out there. And I think that most people will benefit from just looking for more whole foods in their diet, women for sure, increasing their protein intake, because we usually undereat protein. Looking for some good carbohydrates, I didn't want to say good because I don't moralize food, but the carbohydrates that have got more nutrient dense content. So things like fruit, vegetable, whole grains, they're really great to support your body's energy requirements. And fat tends to just come naturally, because most of us will have butter or avocado or olive oil. I always think if women focus on the protein, the fats and the carbs tend to work themselves out.
Sure. Yeah. And do you work on macros with your clients? Is that something that you do?
Well, I don't, because but macros are I know it's funny, because I think if you're not in nutrition and you think of macros, women think of macros as being a diet type, but it's just a way of recognizing the food you're eating, as you know, right? Mm-hmm. So the three macronutrients are protein, carbohydrates, and fats. And some diets, like the ketogenic diet, basically reduce the carbohydrate content to about 25 grams, which is nothing. And so it sort of omits a food group. And so when people say they count their macros, it's just a way of tracking their food. I mean, you can instinctively look at your food and guess what you're eating. Or you can track your macros if you want to say, I want 100 grams of protein a day and 120 grams of carbohydrates. You can track those, or you can track your calories. They're all just measurements in a way. And I think it really depends on the individual. Some people really struggle with that from an emotional standpoint with food, and actually prefer to use like cues. And like I talk about in my book, like behavioral habits, like, am I hungry? Have I eaten sufficient? Can I stop now before my button pops off my jeans? You know, it really depends on the person. And so I think you should work with where you are from a historic standpoint, an emotional standpoint, and also a goal-oriented standpoint, right? It depends.
I think that, it does. Well, you know, when it comes to weight loss and menopause, there is no one size fits all answer. And I think it's really important that we realize that each one of us is going to have a different response, you know, to some people are better when they, you know, depending on how they feel. It's really important to tap into how you feel and how, like, if I'm an exerciser. I don't lift a lot, and I know you really advocate lifting, and so I can't wait to talk to you a little bit about your MMR workouts. But I'm a triathlete. And so I'm always looking to run faster or swim faster or bike faster. And I mean, I haven't been swimming since COVID, but you know, like yesterday I went for 6 800s, and that's not easy, but I did
that's hard.
And I didn't do it on the track because the track's closed. So I'm doing I live in Westchester County, New York. There's a lot of hills. So I'm running these 800s on the street, and I did my fastest 5K ever. I mean, my fastest 800 and my fastest 400 ever. And it was like a sub 8-minute mile, which is faster than I was able to run when I was 18, just during that time. And so the point I'm trying to make is that everybody is different, right? And so what you're going to like as exercise might not be the same thing that I like. And if somebody's looking to lose weight in menopause, right, which is, according to our studies of at least 30,000 women, it's between 46 and 48% of our population thinks that once they lose the weight, everything is going to fall into place. So if that's the case, then what is your biggest recommendation? And you talk in your book about these, menopause, metabolic, is that resistance training?
Resistance training, yeah.
Yeah.
So first of all, I wanted to ask you about your running, and I know I'm not supposed to be the one asking the questions,
that's fine.
but
I don't mind.
Are you postmenopausal?
Am I postmenopausal? Yeah, you know what, I am. And I'll tell you, I took the pill for a long time because I had really severe mood swings when I had periods. And so I took a pill throughout my residency, my surgical residency, which was really hard. And as soon as I smoked for most of so at the end of my surgical residency, I started taking the pill again, and all the way up until I really got serious about wanting to lose weight. And I had gained a bunch of weight, and I was like, this is really upsetting me. And so I just abruptly stopped the pill. And then I got a fibroid that went from like all the way up to my sternum. And so I had to have a uterine artery ablation. That wasn't fun. Those hurt because it was, not only did I have to have a endometrial biopsy. Okay. So childbirth has nothing on that. Okay.
Yeah.
But then I had to have this uterine artery ablation, and then I had a degenerating fibroid, and that was painful. And I had it on a Friday and had to operate on Monday. And I was in the operating room just sweating because it was like degenerate. I had no idea, I just went to work. So, so I mean, that's my, one of my stories. But when I stopped the pill, I didn't immediately get a period, but I had some weird symptoms, and I was like, okay, well, my brain, I had like brain fog. I couldn't remember the names of anatomical landmarks and drugs that I was prescribing. Like, this is really fucked up. And so,
especially because it's your job,
right? And so I went on hormone replacement, and I got a period, and I was like, and I used bioidenticals, and I was like, nope, this isn't for me, and I'll just deal with it. And so, yeah, but that's a long answer to, yes, I'm postmenopausal.
Well, I mean, that is a crazy story, actually. And we all have that, don't we? We all have our unique story. All I was going to say is what the research is pointing to is that, like running and endurance sports are more of a catabolic type exercise. So the body breaks down essentially, and where strength training is more of an anabolic stimulus. And estrogen being an anabolic hormone, it sort of aids us to maintain and build lean muscle. So when we go into estrogen deficiency, which is menopause, maintaining our muscle mass that we already have and then building more on that becomes more challenging. And so people it seems to be, the research is showing, and anecdotally in my community as well, that women who are in the perimenopause phase, which is the most symptomatic for most of us, right, are really struggling with those endurance type events because energy is impacted. We've got chronic fatigue, all from the estrogen deficiency. And then we're then stressing our body more with these long endurance runs. And the recovery is just so challenging. And so, and then what seems to happen is when we find that sort of hormonal equilibrium that seems to happen in that low level in postmenopause, is the recovery seems to be better for the endurance things. So there's definitely a phase through menopause where women do struggle with the endurance. And so what I say to them then is, if you are an endurance bunny, if you're like a triathlete that literally has to put the hours in, otherwise you cannot compete. I mean, that's the thing with triathlons, right? It's all right me saying you got to strength train and you're like, I got to do 10 hours of like running and swimming. I get it, right?
Yeah.
Then that's maybe an opportunity for women to sort of think, well, how can I improve my run without doing like a 10K, 20K run today? Well, maybe I can do hill sprints. Maybe I can do fartlek. Maybe I can do things where I do hit that anaerobic threshold, but I recover quicker because it's less catabolic in nature. And so that's what I would say to those people that love their cardio and don't want to give it up. Consider ways you can maybe add some sprint work in that really is easier to recover from, but it also aids your training. You don't lose anything from your training then. But the strength training to me is an important piece of the puzzle, whether you've got time or not, Michelle. I know you don't.
So what's really interesting is that you talk about things that are really like second nature to you. It's a different language from what people who don't exercise talk about. So you said hill sprints, you said fartlek, you said endurance stuff. And I always used to ride a bike. I was in medical school and my son had leukemia when he was a baby. And so I did a leukemia ride 100 miles on my bike. And when I was in medical school, just to do something to give back a little bit. And it was, with Team in Training, the Leukemia Society's Team in Training.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so I did that. And that's what kind of got me going back on the bike and doing long things on the bike. And when the menopause, so what happened for me is that I had this menopause epiphany, and I'm like, holy crap, I got to get the word out. And so what did we do? We filmed a TV show that aired on FYI a few years ago. And I was like, okay, what are we going to do? And so we took a bunch of women, we went to Mallorca and we rode bikes. And I was 50 pounds heavier then, but I had to hire a coach because I'm like, crap, I'm not, I'll cycle. And so that's what put me on this path of exercise and endurance stuff. And what's really interesting for me is that I never had heard of fartlek. I always thought exercise was punishment. I didn't have any good relationship with my body. And so, and I don't think I'm alone there. I think that especially I still fight with myself to get my workouts done. And so how do you help women who've like never were exercisers?
Yeah. And that's such a great point. And, it's really important for every woman to know, first of all, before they start exercising, that they are capable. Because what we know happens in perimenopause and menopause is, our confidence takes a hit, our self-esteem takes a hit, and body image issues are at their peak in menopause, like they are in puberty. It's very similar. Also, eating disorders, they're seeing a growth in the occurrence of those. And so it's a serious conversation that we need to have. And, if you are in a position where you literally don't believe in your athletic ability. And any woman that exercises is an athlete. I don't mean that you're going to run for the Olympics, but I mean that anyone that exercises is using their athletic ability. Women lose belief in that. And so I, in my post, try to encourage women to try something, to believe in themselves and to know that they're capable. And I always use silly analogies like, I've seen pictures of you throwing your grandkid in the air and he's 40 pounds. And I've seen you coming out of Walmart with 20 bags. I know you're strong. You just need to believe in yourself. And so there's a few different ways I do it. So first of all is trying to instill that belief system. One, getting them to start small. You'll get that in my book all the time. Like, I'm all about just chipping away and finding consistency. You don't have to start working out by doing a 50-minute strength workout. You could start by doing 10 minutes a day. Like, it doesn't matter. You set the rules. Like, it might take time to build up like a habit. Yeah, we know that's true. It's going to be easier to start a habit if you do something you like. Right? So if strength training isn't for you, I want every woman to strength train. But if it's not for you, then what is your thing? Is it walking? Do you really like hiking? Do you like going out for a cycle? Do you like swimming? What is it? Can you commit to this consistently for a short period of time? How will you be accountable? Find an accountability buddy. When the gym's open, go and join a body pump class. I don't care. Find something that floats your boat, essentially, right? And then also realize this, that everybody was a beginner at some stage. I don't hope women don't compare themselves to me. I've always done this, right? Some things come very easy to me. And I always try and show women that there's ways to adapt everything that I show them so that you have a starting point, right? That's always what I want to try and do for women. And sort of say to them that once you get started, and you start exercising and you speak to me in a year's time, especially if you're strength training, you will feel completely different to how you feel right now, because exercising regularly, especially strength training at a cellular level, changes you.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? You're proof of that.
Absolutely, it does. And what I found for me, and I talk about this in terms of the medical community, and I say it's dose dependent. If you want to get good at running, you have to like do it, but you cannot have an all or nothing mentality. Anything worth doing is worth sucking at it first. That's what I say. And you don't learn a new skill by not practicing. You've got to practice. And so that's what I found with running. And all right, so anything worth doing is worth sucking at it first. And when I first started running, I went out for a run. And my coach, I think he assigned me like a 12-minute run or a 1 mile run or something. And I came back and my wife says, well, that was fast. And I'm like, well, what do you expect? It was a mile. It was like, I had told him I was doing bike only. And I said, I want to start running. And so he started me really, really slow. And I was able to, in 2018, I did a Falmouth Road Race, which is a 7-mile run. And I did it in 11 minutes per mile. I was pretty happy about that. It took me an hour and 23 minutes plus, but
how long did it take you from your very first run until you did the 7-mile run? How many? I
want to say maybe 2.5 years that I had trained.
That's the point, right? So you don't start something and expect to be amazing. And, when there's lots of women like running because they like that high, and I get that. And I run just to get away from the family. They drive me nuts, right? So like I do run. But like I also came back from a COVID long haul, right? So I know what it's like to like lose your fitness, and it was a terrible time. And I started out doing running. I call it like the walk and run together. And I would just run really slowly and walk when I needed to. And I was like, I don't care. I'm going to run for 10 minutes, run for 15 minutes, whatever, and then come back. It'll be fine. And I didn't judge myself. And so women need to stop judging themselves on things and committing to being a failure just because it didn't go to plan. Like if you got out the door and put your trainers on, you're already winning. And so I just think that just reframing how we do things. Like another thing as well is like, so exercise isn't easy. It's not meant to be easy. It's meant to be challenging, because it's when you challenge yourself, that's when you see growth and change, right? So don't be, I always say it shouldn't tickle, but like, don't be afraid of it being hard, because you can do that, right? But a lot of women are afraid of that. They're afraid of like getting out of their comfort zone. And so, like I said, just start small and just build up and build up, because as well as your endurance and your passion building up, curiosity will build as well. And you'll wonder how much more you can do.
Yeah, no, that's really true. And I guess, for me, it's like, well, what else can I do with this body? I'm 56 years old. And when I was 18, I was running. And then I went and had heart surgery and I never went back to running. And so I was like, okay, I never went back to running, but maybe I can do it again. And now I'm thinking, I did a 5K in sub 30 minutes. I wonder if I can do it in 27, and so those are the things, but it's really important. We talk about this a lot here at the Menopause Movement. We talk about how it's important to fail forward. And when you can reframe failure as an opportunity just to improve, then it's gonna, that makes a huge difference, because then it's not all or nothing. It's just like, I did what I could. Awesome.
There's the 3-to-1 ratio theory of negative bias, right? Negative thought, where I'm not an expert of this, and I'm probably going to mess this up completely, but the idea is you go to do something hard and the first thought will be negative. It's our natural fallacy to go there, right? To go, but I can't, or this is too hard. And it's then, what are the 3 positives that you can counteract that with? So you've got your negative thought, think of 3 positives. Oh, well, maybe I can try a few less reps, but when I do it, it'll feel great on my core, or, whatever. Like, you can reframe it. And that's not just for exercise, that's for everything in life, of course, right? Because once you've done a few hard things, then it does get easier. Like the mindset, the overcoming those blockages becomes easier. And I bet 2.5 years ago, when you went for your 12-minute run, there wasn't a thought in your head that was like, well, I'm doing this because in 2.5 years, I need to run 7 miles. Because, and I think women need to know, you don't need to have a goal. You can actually just go in, get your toes wet, because you're doing this for your health, for your future. You're menopausal now. That's it. We're in it. We're not coming out of it, right? So you need to do everything you can to support your health, because potentially we've got another 30, 40 years along the line.
I would hope so. Yeah. I would really hope so. I like to say I'm going to live to 150. I want to see what happens with technology.
That's too funny. I think I'd be sick of me by then. Like, literally, I'm a bit too full on even for myself sometimes. Yeah.
It's so funny. So I want to hear your story with COVID, because I think it's really relevant, given the fact that so many women have gotten sick, and, not a lot of people have been talking about it. I mean, I was there on the front lines. I was working in the hospital. I saw a lot. We're in New York, and New York got hit hardest.
Yes, yes.
And nobody was surviving. Everybody was leaving the hospital in a body bag. I mean, it was really scary. And we come home, we leave all our clothes in the garage, come in like in our underwear and take a shower. I mean, we were really scared. It was scary. So what happened with you? Can you just briefly tell us your COVID story?
Yeah, I mean, I was watching the same things as, obviously, not just on the TV, and it was heartbreaking. So I can't even imagine what it was like being in it. And I almost feel like it's like people have forgotten what that's like, and then we're watching India right now, and it's just breaking my heart. And so I'm a rule follower. I always have been. I know I'm a little bit naughty in everything, but I do follow the rules. I don't try and break them. And, my kids' school shut down at March break last year. My husband worked from home. So we were all at home, and we were going to order food delivery in, but there were things we needed just to make being at home work. And so I was going to do like the odds and sods around, in the different stores. And at the time, people were sanitizing, but there was no mask mandate. And it was just a bit confusing for everyone. And almost straight away, I got COVID. And I came home and I went, I think I've got bad allergies. My eyes are itchy, my throat's sore, and that's all I had. But then I just started going downhill and just didn't feel great. And then a week later, I was getting really bad chest pains, and I couldn't catch my breath, and I was no energy. So at the time, there was no testing centers, and you had to go to my doctor wouldn't see me, the emergency wouldn't see me. Nobody would let me in, because everybody was like freaking out, right? They were phoning me while I was sat in the car going, I can't breathe. And they were like, well, you're not coming in. It was awful. So I went to the ER and I had all these people in hazmats looking at me and they were like, we can't test you because we have limited testing. And if we do use this test on you, it's usually we're doing it under the conditions where you've a drop in oxygen. I didn't meet the criteria. They gave me a positive diagnosis, and that was fine with me. They just said your oxygen's down to 95. It's not low enough to admit you. Go home and recover. So I did, and I did recover, but then I didn't recover properly. And that was it. It was, I suppose, essentially the same as you would see in a post-viral syndrome. You know, some people get a virus and then it takes them months and months to recover. And that's all it was with me. I had shortness of breath. I couldn't walk outside. I live in Houston and it's 100% humidity and I couldn't get my breath. And I had paranoia. I got depression again. It was really challenging. And the worst thing is I was probably one of the first people with the long haul. I mean, we're hearing about it now. Thankfully, they think maybe up to 30% of people with COVID are going to be long haulers. And there's definitely an association with the estrogen deficiency, right? Which is part of our immune function. And so I know that they're doing some studies in the UK about this now, but whatever. I was like in the dark again. I was like, here we go. It's just like perimenopause all over again. And I really struggled to get my head around it because I just thought, is this it now? Are my lungs damaged? Is this me for life? And anyway, long story short, I did recover. I had a good medical team, like a good pulmonologist and also gastroenterologist because my guts were rotten by the end of it. Sure. And I'm 100% better now, but I did have to do the soft approach back into my health and wellness, right? I was like, how am I going to start feeling normal again? Exercise was the worst thing for me. Every time I did something, I was back in bed for 4 or 5 days. And that's what we're hearing. It's like just too much of a stimulus. I don't really know. I don't understand. But I was going to say, the one thing I would say at the end of all this is that I'm super proud of myself. And it's the one thing I've done in my life that I'm really proud of is I taught myself to swim. So I'd never been able to swim before. And it was the only thing I could do when I was sick because the wet water was cool and it helped with my breathing. So I was doing breaststroke like an old granny up and down the pool. And I'd never been able to swim despite my husband being like a national swimmer for Scotland. I'd tried all my life. And then one day I was like, I'm just going to try again. And I did. And I'm now swimming like a mile when I go, and I'm super, super proud of it. So we can learn new things too.
Yeah, that definitely. I mean, I started swimming again. You know, we had gone to Hawaii in November of 2017, and there was a guy swimming laps in the pool. I'm like, I haven't swum laps in a long time, and so I swam some laps without any goggles or anything. And so I sent my coach a text and I said, I started swimming. He's like, yes. And so then he started signing me pool workouts, and I was doing them. And then it was really interesting to see the convergence, how like all the things got better as I did the swimming with the biking and the running, and then COVID.
Yeah. Well, I'm in Texas where there's no rules, and it's a Wild West. And but we were very good at being safe. But our local outdoor pool remained open, and we could go in our swimming stuff and come home in it and be dry, right? So my husband did the same thing. He wrote me programs, and I'm really enjoying it. And I'm glad I found it, even at this stage.
Yeah, no, that's really great. Swimming is really good for your lungs because there's a hypoxic component, and so I find it really interesting that helped with your recovery.
So I don't know anything about that. So that's really good to hear. So what does that mean, hypoxic component?
So you have to hold your breath.
You do. You
have to hold your breath. And so that makes it partially hypoxic. And so what happened was, what happens in COVID, if you've seen any of the x-rays, I mean, they're atrocious. They're scary. It's like white all throughout the lungs. And that's for people who have, really bad symptoms. And probably what happened was your vital capacity improved slowly with your swimming.
So the pulmonologist, gave me medication, asthma medication and omeprazole for my stomach. I had aspirating, acid into my lungs as well, all of those things. And then I went back 3 months later. And during that 3 months, I'd increased my swimming capacity. I'd done drills in the pool that allowed me to hold my breath, like 5-stroke, 7-stroke. I also took on some Wim Hof. I was like, I'll throw everything at it. So I was doing like these controlled breathing things every day religiously. And when I did the retest, he was like, you're like literally off the charts. And I was like, I beat the system. I was so happy.
Good
so
job.
I do put it down to being part of my recovery.
Yeah, for sure. And so Wim Hof, just to tell the audience, Wim Hof talks about how to survive in the cold, and not just survive, but thrive. And he tells you to take cold showers. And
he's crazy.
Yeah, he's fucking crazy.
He's crazy. And so I said to my husband, of all of the people I'm following, this man is like off the chart, but I'm prepared to do anything. And I did start doing cold baths, but really I'm a hot bath woman.
I don't like the cold at all. I tried it, and he's actually, if you have Insight Timer, which I recommend for meditation, if you have the premium subscription, you can get a class. It's like a 30-day class with Wim Hof on how to breathe that way and how to do a cold shower and all that stuff. But I just, it's hard. It's hard for me. So we didn't really hit all of the things, and we've been talking a while. It's okay. There's so much. But what I'd like to know is if we could talk just a little bit. You go into stress management in your book, and one of the things that happens to women in menopause is anxiety will happen out of the blue. And you know this from your community, and I know this from mine. And it's like I don't know who I am anymore, and why am I afraid of everything all of a sudden? And so, how do you recommend that women start to look in de-stressing?
It's so hard, isn't it? And as well as having maybe that stress component, then maybe also struggling with other neurological stuff like depression as well. Like it just all hits us, isn't it? The brain fog, the cognitive stuff. I haven't struggled a lot with anxiety through menopause personally, but I've had a couple of incidences that I literally couldn't believe. It's like I thought I was like going to die, and I think that most women are experiencing that in some respect through perimenopause. And so I worked with a psychologist in the book because this is outside of my scope of practice. I know what worked for me, but I wanted to understand like why it would work. And so definitely the breathing. Like if you're not meditating and doing breathing, I don't care how woo-woo and hippie you think it sounds, it works. We know it does. And the mindfulness side of it, like the reframing of our emotions, like trying to bring things back to the present instead of like hyper focusing on what might go wrong, has been shown to even change our brains on MRI scans, right, Michelle? You know that. Yeah. So it's work. It's not quick. You need to compound it. You need to just do it all the time. But it's actually something I learned this from my son who is on the spectrum. He's, I suppose you used to call it Asperger's, but he's neurodiverse. So he will spend all of his life with anxiety and depression. It's just one of those things he has to deal with. Yeah. And I watch him and I've learned from him that, going away when he's stressed and doing deep breathing to elicit the parasympathetic nervous system to just calm you down out of that like fight or flight mode. And then reframing the situation to say, well, what can I control right now? What will happen if I go with these thoughts? Like what's the worst thing that could happen? And then sort of like just finding a place of stillness and quiet. It's so challenging. And I definitely recommend women work with a professional on this. But if they're at the place where they just feel anxious and they want to do something immediately, then I talk in my book about how to do belly breaths, but you can do them, you find them anywhere. Go online and just type in diaphragmatic breathing. Doing big, deep belly breaths is just such a lovely way to calm you down. It also helps with the pelvic floor as well. So,
the pelvic floor, yeah.
And then, again, it might be that everything you do outside of your life, it's not enough. And you may need like either hormone replacement therapy or anti-anxiety medication. Just do what it takes to feel in control again. But exercise plays a huge role in this as well. Strength training, there's a couple of new studies come out have shown how it can actively decrease the episodes of anxiety. Strength training Definitely strength training. And
Yeah.
I know walking and all the other cardio ones are good for it too. But this is just a new study, which I was quite happy to see. So any type of exercising is going to be really great for your overall mental wellness, right?
Yeah, that's great. And also there's a framework in, I don't know which episode it is of the Menopause Movement podcast, but it's called Why Do We Get Anxiety in Menopause? And I go through a whole framework on how to manage your anxiety as it comes up. And that just came back to me. So go ahead.
All I was going to just add on to that, and as well as it's like you keep saying, and if you have anxiety, then you have it. It's not your fault. Don't blame yourself. Don't think you're failing. Like, it's just what we're dealing with, right? Your body is going through a seismic change, and this might be part of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's so important for us to accept ourselves where we are and stop looking at the past to define our present and our future. And when we can do that, I think that really is so powerful. You know, whenever I get a new power trainer for my bike, my FTP changes, right? The functional threshold power. And my old one, I had an FTP of close to 200, and I got a new one, and my FTP went down to 160. And I was like,
damn.
But you know, at the end of the day, that's just a number. It's just like the scale. You know, the scale isn't my, you know, the be all end all of who I am. You know, what can I do with this body now? And yeah, I wish I was fat like I was when I was in my 30s, but you know.
But it doesn't define you, and you're right.
No.
That's exactly it. And where women place a lot of value on their self-worth based on the number on the scale or their comparison to their younger self. Right. And I really love the idea of reframing that to look at what makes you thrive right now. Like, what are your strengths? What are your values? How would it look if you actually rechanneled your energy into working with those instead of working against them?
Yeah. And then the other thing I like to say is, you know, we spent a lot of time today talking about exercise. Mm-hmm. And the thing that got me going on exercise was the link between cognitive decline and lack of exercise. And I thought, you know, I don't want to lose my mind as I age. And if that means that I have to move my body a little bit more, and the research shows that, then, you know, that's what I'll do. I'll just move my body a little bit more. And so that was the reason. It wasn't, I mean, yeah, I wanted weight loss, and I had this belief that exercise and weight loss were linked. And since then, I've really learned that that's probably not true. It has a lot more to do with what you put in your mouth.
It's pretty much all to do with what, I mean, exercise is really good for body composition, right?
Yeah.
And strength training in particular, you know, you can change your shape, but you may not change your weight. And does that matter? How much does it matter to you? Like, it's all worth asking yourself these questions. What ultimately are you looking for? If you could change that to say, like you just did, I just want to be the strongest and healthiest I can be right now, then that's a brilliant goal.
Yeah. So was there anything else you were hoping to share today that we didn't get to?
Well, I know we didn't talk about the workouts, and I know but that's fine. But all I would say that is, if anybody wants to start strength training and they actually don't know how to, I think that that's a good entry level for everyone. I show women how to adjust it, and it's quite good right now because we're in a pandemic, because you don't really need a lot of equipment, just one set of dumbbells. And I just would say that just take the stress off whatever you're thinking about yourself, because I get really upset I'm pretty sure you do too, when you see women constantly down on themselves. And so just try and look at yourself through kinder eyes if you can, and just work with where you are right now.
Yeah. And in the book, Menopocalypse, there is a 12-week training program on weight, you know, on strength training. So if you want to get started on strength training, go and buy that book. We're going to link it up in the show notes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Amanda, where can people find you?
So easiest way is just to go to my website, amandathebe.com. Everything's there. You can access my book, my social media, all of those things. And I also have a list of resources there that people can go to.
Great. Thanks so much. Amanda Thebe, thanks so much for joining the Menopause Movement podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, we can't off talk, can't we? I'm terrible. I always make things go off track, but it was great to be here. Thank you.
Did you know that menopause is not a medical condition? Most doctors don't know this either. I like to say that menopause is the privilege of a long life, and to really take hold of our lives in menopause, we have to unlearn what society and the medical establishment has told us about menopause. This is why I've created this brand new course called Understanding Your Hormones and Managing Your Menopause. I want to show you how you can get on top of your menopause right now so that you can start to see it as the best time of your life. Now, this course is valued at $500 and is in the beta testing phase. And we're currently accepting applications for women to test it out for us at no charge in exchange for feedback and testimonials. But the best part is, because you're a podcast listener, you can bypass the application process and go straight to the front of the line. To register right now, simply visit menopausemovement.com/hormones, and we can get started together right now. Remember, you can get started right now at no charge to you in exchange for feedback and testimonials when you go to menopausemovement.com/hormones. And I'll see you inside the course. Thanks so much for being a part of the Menopause Movement.